On this episode of The Perfect Route, we're talking with Rebecca Reese, a learning and development professional in higher education who shares her thoughts about how her field changed during and after the pandemic. Agility comes to mind, along with the ability to adapt to different learning styles and the needs of programs. Let's take a walk on the perfect route. Hello and welcome to The Perfect Route. We're privileged today to have Rebecca Reese with us. Hello, Rebecca.
Hi, Bill. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Um, well, let's start at the beginning. What first
Mm,
pulled you into the world of learning and development, and how has your perspective on your role and the role of L&D evolved over time?
yeah, so my path into learning development was actually fairly circuitous. I started off wanting to be a person that worked with persons with disabilities, and so I got a degree in communicative disorders, and then I got a master's in therapeutic recreation. Um, and And I thought, you know what? I don't think I'm doing enough still to make, the lives of, persons with disabilities better. So I got into instructional design because I saw it as a path where I can make learning better for them, and I can also help, the supporters of that learning do a better job of uplifting learners in different environments, whether it's training, whether it's traditional education. And so that's kind of how I got there. um, so a lot of people are like, that seems weird, but that's how it landed. My perspective on the role has greatly evolved over time, and a lot of times it is reflected by what is happening in the world around us. So the current administration has made a lot of changes to how we deliver learning and development, who can have that learning and development. What does that look like? Redacting things that they feel
Hmm.
are inappropriate. Um, but it just made me lean in more, because I saw this as um, a potential area where we would lose people who were already using online education, traditional education, and training to improve their lives and improve their families' lives and status. And it just made me lean in harder to say, you know what, we need to keep going, and we don't need to let up, and we don't need to stop. We need to make sure that, excuse me, we need to make sure that everybody, has the opportunity, which we've always done that in education, in training, in learning. Um, but when things happen, it causes a bump, and everybody goes, "Ooh, wait, do we need to stop?" No, we don't need to stop. We need to keep going.
Um, what would be a good example of a significant bump? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, so significant bump. So we can talk about DEIA. We can talk about the fact that we've had to uh, remove individuals in our teaching materials that are reflective of the students that are taking the learning. So I work at an art and design school, and you want to have the people that are in the videos, in the demonstrations, to be reflective of the students that are sitting there. They want to look at that expert that is doing that abstract piece, and they want to be able to see themselves in that role, because if they don't, then it devalues their ability to become that person, right? And it makes it more difficult for them in the long run. So that's a bump. But I at my school, and in a lot of other places, a lot of people have decided, you know what? No, we need to put different faces, and we need to put different colors of people in there, so that it's representative of who the learners are.
And it certainly helps the learners um, who are viewing the training better engage with the training, I would
Yeah,
think.
yeah. If I can see myself in that role, if I see somebody that looks like me, that talks like me, that came from a background like me, then I am more engaged and I am more vested in that that you want me to do, right? That learning, that training, whatever it is.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I'm also wondering, we've gone through COVID and
Mhm.
students had a lot of experience with online learning in that time. Has that changed how the, over time, has that changed how the student population engages with the learning?
Yeah, it really does. So yes, they had a lot of learning. They had a lot of bad learning during COVID. you know,
Yes.
death by Adobe PDF. And PowerPoint. But more so, the student has changed. The students that we have now, because of COVID, because of the way that event affected not just us as an individual, but us as with our infrastructure and our population. A lot of people had to go full time to work where so we have lost a large segment of that traditional student population.
Hmm.
And we have a lot more people that are working two jobs that are of that traditional student age, but they have to do that. And so we as individuals that are trying to provide that learning experience, so that's that growing experience, we've had to change so that we offer more hybrid, more flex, high flex learning, more asynchronous, and then when they do come together synchronously, making sure that it is it has a lot of high value, and they have a lot of you know I don't want to say hands on, but a lot of that experience that you can't get by just reading and watching a video and things like that. And so that's really, kind of the area that we've gone um, to meet students where they are, to meet learners where they are.
And I was an art major as an undergraduate.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
everything, yeah, everything, hands-on in the studio, critiques were face to
Mm.
face, nothing remote.
Right.
It's hard to mail a sculpture. Um, yeah. So, you know, ha- and I'm wondering just how the creative process is reflected in the learning now.
Hmm. Yeah. So if you're familiar with high flex learning, um, what that does is it takes the low engagement part out of the classroom, and it puts the textbook reading and the writing, and it allows for more iterations of drafts of writing, or of for the creative writers, or more iterations of a photo that you've taken, and you're working on the shading and the lighting and things like that. And then it takes that experience where you are with the instructor, and it makes it to where you have more time with them. And they because in a classroom you would have just sat there, and then you might have had studio time where you could go in and do something like sculpture or whatever. But even then, I mean, how often was your instructor actually there with you, right?
Mm.
So it's a process, and it's something that we've all had to grow into. Other institutions as well, they create portfolio areas where the students can display stuff virtually so that they have that portfolio of work. If you're talking about tactile things like sculpture, a lot of times what would be implemented is a local studio to that student. They work with them, and the school will work with that studio to make an arrangement so that student can go in there and do that work. Um, but they have like a Zoom with the instructor, or maybe the instructor finds someone that's local that could mentor, those kinds of things. So
Mm.
it's really engaging more of that community around that student, and not disengaging them, because if you can't be there, you can't be there, but you've got to find alternatives to help that student, because there's no way that our students that are in, because we have students all over the place, even, outside of the United States. If that student in, New York is not going to come here, to do their work on their acrylic, you know, painting, right? Or their mixed media. And they're not going to be able to have anybody physically there unless you have that infrastructure that you can build with that community, that broader community.
And then that flexibility is so important in
Hmm.
your delivery.
Hmm.
Granted, any sort of studio learning has to be a flexible experience anyway.
Yeah.
But do you find that the technology it gets in the way, or does it enhance the flexibility?
If I said both, would that make you mad?
No, not at all.
So both. I see it as inhibiting because oftentimes, as you know, because you were a student as well, we don't have the money to buy a camera or a computer that has enough RAM, or we don't have internet because we don't have national internet like other countries do.
Hmm.
And so, the students might struggle with that. So that could be inhibiting. But I think it enhances it as well because it gives you more opportunity to establish, if you will, drop-in times for the faculty. So, they always have the faculty office hours, right? Nobody
Hmm.
ever came to them. I had faculty office hours where I sat in an office and nobody came. So that was my lunch break. But, you know, when it's on Zoom, it's lower stakes and it's less, if you will, invasive, and more people are more comfortable with doing that now. And I think a lot of that goes to the fact that the millennials on down have, had more experience with, or more interaction, if you will, with engaging with others with technology, rather than as much face to face like Xers like myself, right?
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, Gen X represent. I'm at the very
yeah.
start of Gen X myself.
Yay.
Yes, and our generation, I think, exhibits that flexibility. We grew up with
Mm.
technology. Um, I remember my first computer, which was the size of a paperback book, and graduated to an Apple II and then an IBM
Mm.
PC and a Unix terminal. So it was fun while it lasted,
Yeah,
and and then the Mac and then Windows came out, and
yeah,
now I find that learners have such high expectations for
yeah,
the production values, the presentation of learning.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's another piece too. Like my mom was a computer programmer, so like she actually brought stuff home, and my brother and I built our first computer together.
Hmm.
And I think that that's that. And my brother's the bottom end of X, and so it's that piece where we wanted more. We wanted it to do more. And I think when we were able to get the machines to do more, we started producing more and we started saying, yeah, this is closer to what we want, right? And it made it better for the millennials and the Z's and everybody else. But I
Hmm.
think it does set a bar that is, it keeps moving up, right? It keeps getting higher and higher
Yes,
because we have different expectations. We started off what email, and we thought email was like instant messenger when we first got it. And we were like, why aren't they answering me? Nowadays, it's like an email can go, 3 or 4 days, and we're like, meh, it's okay. So,
right. Yeah, and there's texting, instant
hmm
messaging, whether it's Slack or Teams or some other platform.
hmm
I often find that adult learners, and especially the young adults, have expectations of instructors and facilitators that they are constantly present.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's not new. That's been around.
Hmm.
I mean, even when I was in school, I remember, you have to do those hard reflections on yourself sometimes. And I remember being that one going, you know, you said office hours and I'm here. And I want to see you, or you said I could, set up any office hours I want, and or I dropped off a note for you and you never responded, or to me it was never. It was like maybe a week later, but so I mean, yeah, it the thing is a lot of folks often think that what the younger population, younger adults are doing now is vastly different than what we did, and it's because we're not critically reflecting back on our own experience sometimes, and that's a big piece when it comes to learning and development is, and when you're mentoring folks, is thinking back, like
Hmm.
what was it like, and not forgetting that piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And certainly what I call the fog of time comes into play for
Mm,
you know, the older generations, the instructors and
mm,
facilitators, and even the content developers. The older we get, the harder it is to remember the bad or negative things.
right.
If anything, we retain the positive pieces, but it's like training for a marathon. You don't
Yeah.
necessarily remember how rough it was. You remember the outcome as long as it was a good outcome.
You never remember how bad your PhD was until you hear another PhD student that you're mentoring say, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible." And then I do this with the students I mentor all the time. I'm like, "It's okay. It's going to get better. Just
Hmm.
stay in there." The first piece of advice I always tell them is, like your dissertation, do not love your dissertation. Never love your dissertation because you will never finish it.
Right. Yeah, I often think of my doctoral program as a 4 year seminar in building a structured framework of PTSD that haunted me for the rest of my life. Um,
Nice.
and and at the same time, I also had a professor who constantly reminded us that we will never know as much about our field as we did at that moment.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
again, the fog of time
Yeah.
um, gets in the way. Now, that negates the whole process of continuous improvement and continuous learning. Of course, we're
Yeah.
going to learn
Yeah.
more about the field.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
yeah. So those are some interesting thoughts about engagement and just what goes on inside the learner's head. And I'm not sure that we spend enough time thinking about that. We're so under the gun with deadlines, or we have our
Mhm.
own goals, that it's
Mhm.
hard to pull a Freaky Friday and swap places with the learner.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's one of the things that I feel that we should be more um, critically reflective of, is who who are we working with? Who is
Hmm.
with us now? Who's on the other side of that screen, that phone call, that, who's sitting in there? And another piece that we don't reflect on is who is it that we are who is it that we have that is delivering that, right? Like, is
Mm.
because the teaching staff or the facilitators, right? They are the same age oftentimes as the people that they are teaching and facilitating. And so, you know, are we giving them the best opportunity to engage with those students and to get that learning uh, content, delivered in such a way that the students get it and the students are able to perform those tasks and complete those outcomes and goals that you have set so that they're whole.
Hmm.
The big thing is at the end of any training or any learning piece is that learner has to be whole. You can't leave anything dangling that is missing. When I say dangling, like you have a goal and that goal is not addressed, right? And then that student then goes to that next level of training or learning, and they can't do one critical piece, right? One part of what they're supposed to do in that next level because they missed the piece or they didn't get enough time with it to really absorb it.
That's a great verb, absorb it.
Hmm.
Um, because in the end, knowledge acquisition is all about that process of making that knowledge your
Yeah.
own. And
Yeah.
especially for graduate students, because and we can say the same thing about adult professionals as well.
Hmm.
Part of
Hmm.
our job as instructors and facilitators is showing them how to continue to learn on
Hmm.
their own. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's that old adage for those that remember it. It's, that battle of assimilation versus accommodation, right? With Piaget.
Hmm.
Um, assimilation is the one where you take the new information and you make it fit the mental frameworks that you already have. And then accommodation is changing that schema and modifying it so that you, in my opinion, you better incorporate what you are learning into your long-term knowledge and your long-term ability to use it.
Hmm. It's certainly challenging, especially with um, students who are learning creative skills and process,
Mm,
because um, making it's almost a meta question. Amending
mm,
or altering your process is so
yeah,
critical to success. And I always thought that being an art student was more challenging than being a business student. Then I did two business degrees and got humbled.
mm,
But I still found a creative side in business that sticks with me till this day. There's creativity in the process.
mhm.
It's just that business has a different set of rules than being at the
Yeah,
writing desk or in the studio.
yeah. I mean, that every subject area, every professional area has a different
Hmm.
set of rules, and you've got to learn those rules. Yeah,
Yeah. It's so critical to have those frameworks inside one's head and be willing to
yeah,
not only stick with them, but as we talked about earlier, being flexible and agile. Sometimes
mhm.
the rules are there for your safety,
Right.
and sometimes the rules were made to be bent.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes they're guide rails.
That's right. They're more like
Yeah,
guidelines than rules, especially with creative processes.
right.
Um, just as long as you're not pouring acid directly on a printing plate, for example, or you know,
Yeah.
yeah, doing something risky with a punch press or a printing press. And
Right.
yeah, seems to be a lot less hazard with writing. Um, Perhaps I should have gone into um, creative writing if I wanted to play it
I don't
safe in the
know. I
studio.
mean, I don't know. You could look at Edgar Allan Poe and say, maybe not.
He is an interesting example to bring up.
Yeah.
Hemingway too. Um,
Oh, see?
yeah,
Too many. There's too many.
yep. There is some psychic damage there. Um, well, let's talk about gaps and underdeveloped areas in learning programs.
Mhm.
How do you identify and address those?
You know, one of the best ways to identify it is to have somebody else look at it. So if you've
Hmm.
created a class, if you've created a training, give it to someone else. That is a hard thing for a lot of people to do, because, I mean, it's kind of your baby, especially if it's your
Hmm.
class or your training. Um, but, it's like kids, the best thing for you to do is to let it go and give it to someone else and be comfortable in telling them to be, like, really look at this and give me some good feedback on how I can make it better. What am I missing? What am I doing too much of? All that kind of stuff. Um, and one of those great people to give it to are your learners.
Hmm.
Especially if you have like a past learner, if you're in education or if you're in training, if you give that to someone who has sat through that specific one that you have, and then go, okay, good, bad, and ugly. I want it all,
Hmm.
right? And then once they have time with it, don't sit with them with it. Like, give it to them, give them some time, week or two, and then have them give you the feedback, and then sit down with them and talk through it, because maybe they don't understand a particular path that you took, um, but then that way they can hear your thinking behind it. Maybe your thinking was right and they weren't they just weren't seeing it your way. Maybe your thinking was flawed. But that's a really big gap that people have in development of learning and training. Um, and same with delivery. When you're delivering a training, or you're delivering, if you're in a classroom, in classrooms specifically, they have people that come in and they evaluate you on and how you're doing, and then they look at it compared to what students are saying in the student surveys, if they get any back, right?
Hmm.
And so you have somebody that but not a close colleague, because your close colleague is going to be like, "Oh, you did great," and probably put some wallpaper over a few things that you don't want to see because they don't want to hurt your feelings. So
Hmm.
find someone that but somebody that's going to be okay giving it to you just straight up. That right there will go a long, long way. Because when you develop and you deliver devoid of the intended audience, you just created an even bigger gap between the deliverer and the receiver.
Hmm. That makes a lot of sense to me. Um, how do you measure what matters most to supporting the learners?
So a lot of that comes from what's needed in industry, right?
Hmm.
Um, if you are wanting to develop training that helps people become, say, a level 2 HR generalist, right? Then you need to find out what it is that they do. If you don't know, if you don't have that built into your company,
Hmm.
right? Um, in in our school, uh, we we regularly survey the industries that are nearby. And we have agreements, not agreements, but um, ties with individuals that are in graphic design. They own art studios, different things like that. Um, and then we also keep really close connections with our alumni, who help us keep our finger on the pulse of what's happening and where things are changing. So, with the advent and the continuation of AI, that's never going to go away. Um, and I say that because a lot of people are like, it'll go away. It's never going away.
Hmm.
Um, we have to have a lot of conversations around our students, like, okay, this is here. And industry is looking at it as a cheap, easy way to have somebody do a logo for me instead of bringing in a graphic designer, right? Instead of having somebody come in and do that piece. So, how do you, graphic design student, sell your skills so that they hire you instead of just having the HR generalist create a logo, right? Or somebody from marketing with AI? And so, and then also too, continuing to help and it goes both ways, helping industry understand who it is that you are developing so that they can see the purpose and the need for them. Um, one of the biggest things that we've had to do is help our students understand you're going to be creatives in a space with artificial intelligence forever. So you have to learn how to use it and not use it, when it's appropriate, when it's not appropriate. You know, see it as more of a development partner rather than something that's going to take it all away from you, because that's the way a lot of things happen. A field comes up or a tech comes up and it's like, oh, it's going to remove people from this industry forever, and it's nothing has done that yet. I say yet.
Yeah, yeah. And if anything, it seems to offer some time and freedom to learn more advanced skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what that does is, if you want to say, if you write a good, and that's another thing is the prompts, is if you write a good prompt or a good script that has the tool generate a type of logo, say, that you're wanting to work on, and you tell it to give you this, and it can give you multiple iterations on it. And then you have to think about, okay, like what is working, what is not. Do I want to change the colors? And then take that and go do that yourself instead of like continuing to iterate within the tool, because as we are noticing, of course, the hallucinations start to happen and it starts not really listening to you and things like that. And that's because the tool can't do that at this time. And so you have to actually be the person to do the thing now. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and I ran into this with when I was creating a PowerPoint presentation for a two by two screen wall.
Mm,
I'd seen plenty of presentations on there, and the monitor borders would always cut off photos. So
mm,
I
mm,
rigged my presentation up so it was in quadrants,
mm.
and it took me about 3 minutes once I remembered how to do it in PowerPoint.
Exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and and then I got the questions. How did you do this? What sort of magic was this? It was just, a horizontal line, a vertical line, lock it onto the
Yeah.
slide and work from there. Um,
Yeah.
and I
And
don't, oh,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to say, yeah, I mean, so hard conversations like this are happening like on campuses like myself, and it affects us as an entity, right? As a business, because we want students to come to us. And if students are saying, "Oh, but AI is going to take my job," right? Then that's going to affect us. That's going to hit, it's going to hit our ROI, right? So it's a matter of, you know, lots of education outside the school, inside the school, for the faculty, for the students, and then really looking at the tools and
Hmm.
seeing what they can do. And that's going to evolve.
Yeah. And, one of my responses in that objection about AI taking my
Mm.
job is, well, perhaps AI is taking what you think your job is or what you want to be your job.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, as an instructional designer, AI is really good at giving you like beginning jumping points for a rubric or for maybe course level outcomes or module, and then like module level, like dialing it down for you.
Hmm.
Because as instructional designers, we're not the experts, but if we're working with experts, right, then it gives us a place where we can understand what they're trying to accomplish, and then we can come back and have those conversations a little bit differently.
Yes. And again, it's being agile and flexible,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
also learning and using, better communication skills,
Yeah.
active listening, just giving all the clues that you're not only paying attention, but that you are engaged in the conversation. Easier to do
Mm.
face to face than on Zoom, certainly harder to do on email or a text message. But
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
but we as facilitators and instructors, we now have to deal with several more types of communication media than we had to do when we were students.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the generations that are coming into your programs
Mhm.
are frankly more adept at using the media than we are. So,
Yeah,
you know,
well, yeah, I mean, somewhat. I would say somewhat, because they use the media that we use, but they use it differently. So
hmm
every generational grouping, if you will, they use the tools different ways. You know, I remember my niece was talking to me about how she uses Insta, right? Instagram, and I was like, huh, that's interesting. I never thought of it that way. But then I think back to my own self. And when I was in grad school for my PhD, and hopefully my professor, well, he'll never listen to this podcast probably because he
hmm
doesn't, he's a Luddite. But we used Twitter at the very beginning as like an ICQ chat because he knew what chats were, but he didn't know what Twitter was. And so we could have that up and we could chat each other. And then eventually we looked at Twitter and we were like, wait a minute, this is something else. And so then we had to go back and like delete everything, delete our accounts, start all over to use Twitter the way that we eventually learned to use it. So yeah, I mean, every grouping of individuals uses it a little bit differently.
Hmm. And that variety, I find joy in that variety. Um,
Same.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
certainly, there are so many different ways to do a phone call now.
Right.
And sometimes I have to remind students that your smartphone is also a telephone. You can hold it up to your face and have a conversation.
Now
And
you're
not,
just talking crazy.
yeah, it's crazy land. Um, what if you could redesign the learning function from scratch? What would you do differently?
Ooh. Hmm. Um, if I had to do it, so from, okay, if I did it in the educational setting, I would have more voices at the beginning from students, from learners. I would engage the community more because a lot of institutions don't do that. I would engage local businesses, things like that, and make partnerships so that what is being developed is aligns with what both sides want, because you have to understand the institution is just the delivery point. We're just the ones putting it out there, right?
Right.
um and and I would probably make sure that everybody builds their courses before they try to teach them. Don't build the airplane while it's flying. That still happens a lot of times, and then that just does a disservice to the students.
Hmm.
If I was in the training realm, I think what I would do differently is I would give more I would give more autonomy and more power to the facilitators, because oftentimes somebody like myself is given materials and we develop stuff. I don't do that anymore, but I did. Uh, but
Hmm.
like they come in and they say, we need a training on blah. Here's everything you need. And I still have to go talk to a subject matter expert or SME every now and then to kind of really make sure that I'm capturing it right. But then it's turned over to a facilitator, and sometimes that those facilitators are always people that are individuals in the field. Like they're not devoid of whatever they're teaching the training, right? And but they're often taught to just teach it as it is. But I think if there was if either they could get brought into the development of the training, or if they were given more autonomy during the training to find what's working, find what's not working, and then work back with the instructional designer or the learning experience designer that's building it to make it better, that would be really ideal. So it's
Hmm.
it's communication and bringing people in, just like we talked about.
Excellent. Well, thanks for sharing your perspectives today, Rebecca.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed this conversation, and I hope we get a
me
chance
too.
to continue it on a further episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. And thanks to all our viewers and listeners for joining us on today's episode of The Perfect Route.